The first, very simple way to prove germ contagion theory is to expose hundreds of healthy people in every way possible to the breath and body fluids of sick people and see if those healthy people get sick from the exposure, which was done during the 1918 alleged Spanish flu pandemic by Dr. Milton J. Rosenau, along with the U.S. Navy and U.S. Public Health Service. The volunteers were all of the most susceptible age, mostly between 18 and 25 years old, only a few of them around 30 years old, and all were in good physical condition. None of these volunteers, 100 in all, had influenza. They proceeded rather cautiously at first by administering what they claimed was a pure culture of bacillus of influenza, meaning bacteria found in the boogers and lung fluid of people with Spanish flu symptoms, called Pfeiffer's bacillus, in a rather moderate or small amount, sprayed into the nostrils of a few of the healthy volunteers. But all of those trials proved negative, meaning none of those volunteers who got bacteria from people sick with the Spanish flu sprayed up into their nostrils got sick with the flu themselves. So they became bolder and selected 19 of their 100 volunteers and gave each one of them a very large quantity of a mixture of 13 different strains of the Pfeiffer bacillus that they had recently obtained from the lungs at necropsy, meaning lung fluid from a dead corpse who died of pneumonia. These 13 corpse-retrieved organisms were sprayed in an atomizer into the nose and the eyes of the healthy volunteers and back into their throats, while the healthy volunteers were breathing in. They used some billions of these bacterial organisms according to their own estimated counts, but none of the healthy volunteers got sick. Next, they collected the snot and mucus secretions from the mouth, nose, throat, and lung bronchi from the sick people and transferred this mixture into their healthy volunteers. The snot was blown from the sick nostrils into a tray. Bronchial mucus was obtained by coughing up the lung phlegm. Then swabs were taken from the mucous surface of the nostrils and also the mucous membrane of the throat. They mixed all that up together and sprayed it into each nostril and into the throat of the healthy volunteer while they inhaled and sprayed it on their eyes. None of these people got sick. Some of that same mixture was then filtered and injected into other volunteers, but produced no results. None of them got sick. Next, they took new snot and phlegm samples from new sick people. This time, they sprayed a much larger amount into their nostrils, throat, and eyes, and then they made the healthy volunteers swallow the rest of the sick mucus, but none of them got sick. Next, they tried immediate direct transfer from sick person to healthy person, taking little cotton swabs on the end of sticks and transferred the sick mucus directly from nose to nose and throat to throat to the 19 healthy volunteers. And they used a special throat tube for the throat culture to make sure they got not only the material from the tonsils, but also from the posterior nasopharynx, way in the back of the throat. None of the healthy volunteers who received the material directly transferred from sick cases got sick themselves in any way. And this procedure was done to all 19 volunteers at least twice, and some of them 3 times, but none of them got sick. So next they tried an experiment using injections of blood. Blood from the sick people were injected into each of 10 new healthy volunteers, but none of them got sick in any way. So they collected a lot of mucus material from the upper respiratory tract of sick people, ran that through a filter, and injected that phlegm into 10 new volunteers with a needle, and none of them got sick in any way. Puzzled and frustrated, next they led a healthy volunteer to the bedside of a sick patient. He sat down alongside the bed of the patient. They shook hands, got as close as he conveniently could, and they talked for 5 minutes. At the end of the 5 minutes, the sick person breathed out as hard as he could, while the volunteer's face was muzzle to muzzle, 2 inches apart from the sick breath, and was instructed to breathe in as the other breathed out in his mouth. They repeated this 5 times in a row, and after that, the sick patient coughed directly into the face of the healthy volunteer 5 different times. Then after all of that, they moved the healthy volunteer to the next sick patient selected and repeated that entire procedure until each of the 10 healthy volunteers had done this with 10 sick people in a row. Then they were all watched carefully for 7 days, and you guessed it, none of them got sick. Not one. They tried another set of experiments with 50 people that also failed, that he said was too long to go into, and they tried another one with 6 people that failed, and then they gave up. Not only did they not prove the Spanish flu was contagious, but they clearly disproved it. And Dr. Rosenau wasn't even the first to fail, because at the end of his paper, he cites that he already knew that Dr. McCoy and Dr. Ritchie did a similar set of experiments on Goat Island Quarantine Station off San Francisco, and used volunteers who had not been exposed to the Spanish flu outbreak at all, and they too had negative results. They were unable to reproduce the disease. Sure enough, we see it in the public health reports published January 10th, 1919, called Some Interesting Though Unsuccessful Attempts to Transmit Spanish Influenza Experimentally. The San Francisco Angel or Goat Island Quarantine Station experiments, carried out by Dr. G.W. McCoy of the United States Public Health Service and Lieutenant Dwayne Ritchie of the United States Navy. A group of 10 men were divided into 2 squads of 5. One group had put up their nostrils a heavy suspension of liquid cultures made of 8 strains of Pfeiffer's bacillus bacteria without filtration. The other group had the same mixture but put through a Berkefield candle purifier. The results were negative. Nobody got sick after being observed for 7 days. Next, 40 volunteers were put in 4 groups of 10 each, and liquid secretions of phlegm and mucus from the upper respiratory passages of people sick with influenza within the last 1 or 2 days of onset were put up their noses with both medicine droppers and sprayed up their nose with atomizers. In every case, the results were negative. So far as the reproduction of influenza is concerned, nobody got sick. Next, they made a filtered liquid from the phlegm and mucus taken from the upper air passages of a person sick with acute influenza, and used a dropper to put it in the mucous membrane of the eyes of 2 volunteers. And then the same phlegm and mucus was injected into the skin of a 3rd volunteer. In each case, the results were negative. None of them got sick. So finally, just like Dr. Rosenau, they took blood from a person sick with influenza and injected it into one healthy volunteer with negative results. He did not get sick. How could the Spanish flu have been some highly contagious disease if teams of medical doctors and volunteers bending over backwards and doing cartwheels couldn't even make just one person sick after hundreds of volunteers and attempts? Short answer, it couldn't.